Ali.
Hello everybody listening.
Hi guys.
Welcome back to Sonder and Salt, the weekly food podcast about the magic of eating. If this is your first episode, you have landed on part 2 of a 3-part series about flavour and taste. So if you haven't listened to our first episode, please go back and listen to that and then rejoin us for this conversation.
Yes.
If you're not new here and you've been around for a little while and you're enjoying what you're hearing, don't forget to go and leave a review.
Yes.
On Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, on Spotify, 5 stars, anywhere you can find to rate and review us. Join us on what's left of Twitter.
Yeah.
And jump in a conversation with us. Let us know what you're thinking.
On the Insta DMs.
On the Insta DMs, wherever you can.
On the TikTok.
On the TikTok.
Yeah, the TikTok comments, there's always a bit of conversation going on there.
Jump in with us. We want to know who you are. We want to know what you're thinking. We want to know what the vibes are.
Yeah, and if you haven't, check out our website.
Yes.
You can sign up to the newsletter.
Yes.
And if you don't, you're missing out. You're not backdating anything.
No, if you miss it, you miss it.
But there's a lot of juicy bits and bobs in there.
Yep.
Exclusives, all sorts.
And the next episode is going to tie... next installment, should I say, is going to tie in with this episode. So, we're going to skip food highlights today because we have a lot to discuss.
Yeah.
So, we're going to be having a conversation with a guest today and a little bit of pre-context to what we're going to be talking about. If you listen to the last episode, you will know we explored umami, sweet, savoury, salty, all different types of
flavours.
Well,
tastes and taste and
flavour in different ways and how we like to enjoy those things and all sorts. But an area that we don't know much about is a particular flavour profile, umami, and something that enhances umami in food, and that is MSG. And MSG is, have you got a definition there for us?
I do.
Around the world.
I do.
Malacca?
Today we're on healthline.com, which I think is pretty reliable.
Yeah.
MSG, or its government name, monosodium glutamate, is a common flavour additive, and it has roughly been used for about 100 years. In addition to being naturally present in certain foods, which I think is really important to understand because a lot of people think it's something that is completely man-made and it just kind of dropped out of the sky. It's a common food additive in Chinese recipes, canned vegetables and soups and other processed goods. So flavour enhancer is derived from L-glutamic acid, which is naturally present in many foods, and L-glutamic acid is a non-essential amino acid, which means that your body can produce it by itself and doesn't need to get it from food. There is no chemical difference between the glutamic acid found naturally in some foods and that's found in MSG. This means that your body cannot differentiate between the two types.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
So we can have things like cheese or anchovies or even like tomato paste. But
my body won't know if I sprinkled it on out of a bowl.
No, so basically if you're not actually having MSG itself, you are experiencing sometimes the impact of MSG, which is...
it's a naturally derived chemical.
Yeah.
It's just the chemical name for something. The same way we don't go around, I think I heard this on a podcast, we don't go around saying, can you hand me a glass of hydrogen?
It's a naturally occurring compound, which I think is important for everybody to bear in mind as we go through the conversation, because it's not...
This isn't fresh oxygen and nitrate.
Yeah, this scary chemical that somebody's like cooking up in the lab in that way. So.
Trap house food.
Yeah.
There's a new meaning to trap kitchen.
Exactly.
It's interesting that you say that because I definitely grew up thinking that that's what it was. It was some kind of scary additive that was not naturally derived and that it was, unfortunately, I was victim to some of the propaganda in Chinese food. Yeah. In Thai food, in Asian food. I grew up having Chinese pretty regularly. And there were a couple of things that I would overhear on the phone of my parents ordering, which would be like, no MSG, no bean sprouts. Don't ask me about the bean sprouts, that's a story for another day.
That was your dad, didn't it?
That was my dad, no bean sprouts. He loves them now. But that was just something that I grew up experiencing, and at certain parts of my life, as I discussed on the podcast before, I followed various different like dietary restrictions and stuff. At one point, we were very low to no salt. Yeah. And salt and MSG, from my understanding, are basically cousins. Like sodium chloride and sodium glutamate.
It's like me and you.
Aww.
You know, together you're better, you know?
Aww.
I'll be a nice day, I'll take it back next week.
Okay, cool. Thought so. And I was just, that's my kind of experience with MSG. And I still don't cook with MSG. Yeah. But I have learned, and I feel like I'm learning every day how many places it crops up without being screaming MSG, MSG, MSG. Yeah. So I'm interested in the conversation that we're about to have and what I'm going to learn and discover.
I think my relationship with MSG is pretty similar. I grew up in a household where it's just like, this is just this big bad thing.
Yeah.
And I remember vividly eating Chinese and getting this like Chinese restaurant syndrome headache thing.
Right.
But introspection is important because
Mm-hmm.
I also know that I was binging on that feed and I was having
You're
3
intolerant.
plates. Like I was having 3 plates. I probably was dehydrated.
Yeah.
It probably was the salt in my system because I'm having 10 chicken balls, all of that sweet and sour sauce, etc. But then I'm being told it's the MSG.
And also,
that's doing it.
we both grew up in very ingredient households where our parents would cook food and add exactly what they wanted to it.
Yeah.
So those nights when we had Chinese, it was like blood sugar.
It was a lot.
Like,
yeah, my mum would cook almost, between my mum and my dad actually, would cook almost every single day.
Yeah.
Fresh food every single day, home cooked. So I'm having Chinese once a week, every other week, maybe. Like it was a rarity for me, so my body probably wasn't handling it that way and we've just been told it's the MSG. As I've gotten older, I think probably within the last 10 years, there was definitely a portion of that where I was one of those people like, I am actively avoiding MSG, I'm not buying these seasons, I'm not buying these things because I don't want to use it. But then as you get exposed to more things, you kind of think, I don't understand this and I don't actually know why I don't like it or want to use it. I don't actually know why it's bad. And that's why we're having this conversation today because I really want to expand my knowledge and understanding.
Okay, so let's get into this. This is part 2 of our Flavour and Taste mini-series and we are joined by MiMi A. Today we're joined on our second episode on Taste and Flavour by none other than MiMi A. MiMi is a Burmese food writer, cookbook author, activist and MSG enthusiast. MiMi is the author of 2 books, Noodle, which I've researched she didn't title herself, and Mandalay, Recipes and Tales from a Burmese Kitchen, which is easily one of the best looking spines on my bookshelf. Like,
it's beautiful.
The colour of this book. I've now got another yellow. I've got a couple of other yellow and pink books on my shelf, but this one is still the original that stood out the most. This, and it actually, I have it next to Hibiscus, which is another yellow book.
Okay.
I like my sequencing like that. But the book is all about Burmese cooking, and it provides a level of detail and context to what is quite, I guess, relatively an undiscovered cuisine in the UK. Hi, MiMi.
Hi, MiMi.
Hello. I'm just excited that you mentioned Hibiscus. That's Lope Ario, isn't it?
Yeah. She's a friend of
I've got
ours.
that book. I love that book.
What have you... No, we'll get into that.
Sidetrack.
Is there anything we missed off your introduction there? You've got
No,
100 mini pies.
God, that is possibly the most comprehensive introduction I've ever been given. I'm slightly scared, but also impressed.
What was the deal with Noodle? So you were a part of a series of books, but they just told you
Yeah.
yours was called Noodle.
Yeah, no, so, I mean, I had a little bit of artistic freedom, but basically all the other books in the series were called things like Soup and Mince and Bread, all in capital letters and all with an exclamation mark at the end. So it's kind of... That's why I had to go around telling everyone, I didn't call it Noodle, I'm not that enthusiastic about noodles.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I hope that means there's one day a book that's just going to be MSG! Exclamation mark.
Yeah, there ought to be.
What we thought would be interesting to find out is, are there any unique characteristics or flavours that distinguish Burmese cuisine from other Southeast Asian cuisines? I don't think I've tasted Burmese cuisine, and as Harley said, it's pretty much undiscovered in the UK. What kind of are the heavy hitters in the cuisine if you've never tried it before?
I mean, the thing about us is that the Burmese are complete gamuts. We like to have lots of different flavours and we like to have lots of different textures.
I love
so
texture.
In like one particular dish, you have to have at least 3 of the 5. Have lost track. So you've got to have like spicy, salty, sour at least, because people just aren't going to eat it. They're not going to order it when they go out. They're not going to want to cook it when they're at home. You have to keep your palate excited and you have to keep your interested. So like even what I mentioned about texture, every time you have like a forkful or a chopstickful or a spoonful of something, you want a different interplay each time. In terms of like, if you want to compare it to other cuisines, a friend of mine said it was like Indian food on acid.
Okay.
So you've got some very kind of similar kind of like curries and kind of, I don't know, drier dishes, and you also have your kind of the rice and the breads, and then you've also got kind of the salads, and there's often something unexpected in what you get. So like, for example, our favourite salad is called lopeto, which is pickled tea leaves in a salad. And so, you know, apart from China, I don't think any other country eats tea. They just drink it.
Right. Yeah.
But we like to ferment our tea leaves, and then we mix it with like a bunch of kind of crunchy things and fresh things and kind of spicy things. And so you get this mouthful that it's umami, as we're talking about in these episodes. And it's also spicy, and it's also kind of bitter and like astringent in a way that might be quite unexpected in a salad. So I think the nearest analogue in the Western world would be maybe like baby artichokes. It's that kind of slightly surprising kind of bittersweet flavour. We don't like stuff that's kind of one note, let's say.
Yeah. So if we had like some steamed broccoli, that's just not gonna fly.
It's fine, but we'd want like crispy fried garlic on top of it, and maybe like a squeeze of lime juice. You know, that you need to jazz it up.
Nice. And I think that comes from, or does that come from, how complex Burma is in terms of how many ethnic groups it has, like the dialect. So I know you just called yourselves Gannets. I don't think we wouldn't say that. But it's a blend of cultures, right? Like in terms of your people are not very one-dimensional, so why would the food be?
Exactly. We've got 138 at least ethnic groups. But the reason I said we're Gannets is because I think the thing that does connect us all is we're all incredibly greedy. You know, it doesn't matter what goes in, something has to go in. I sometimes refer to us as hobbits because, you know, you have, traditionally you get up at like 6 a.m, maybe earlier, you have your first breakfast, then you might have your second breakfast, then you'd have lunch, then you'd have a snack. I mean, like noodles. So I wrote a whole book about noodles, but the Burmese don't even consider noodles a proper meal. It's a snack. It's between your rice. So you'll have a rice meal, then you'll have a snack of some noodles, and then you'll have another rice meal.
You might be. I
might be Burmese. That sounded. I love a noodle.
Yeah.
I love a noodle and I love a rice dish.
So, I mean, typically, what would you have for breakfast? Would it be like a savoury dish, like a rice-based dish, or a noodle dish for breakfast? Okay.
100%. So we have a sort of, I guess, an unofficial national dish, which is called mohinga, which is like a fish soup, and it's got rice noodles in it, and it's got like a plethora of different garnishes in it. Ooh. And depending on where you are in the country, you might have slightly different toppings. You might have coriander in one place, you might have cabbage in another place, onions in another place, mint leaves if you're further down south, like towards Rangoon, Yangon.
Yeah.
So the topping always changes, but fundamentally it's like a very savoury soup, a relatively thick one. So it's not like, you know, Vietnamese pho is a very kind of clear broth. This is a relatively thick one. So.
Interesting. Okay, well, I heard you talking on a podcast a few years ago about there being one Burmese restaurant in London, or one that was of note to you. And you said basically the root cause of that is a cultural thing, that your food is not your greatest export, that people in Burma traditionally want to be a medical professional, so people don't like leave the country to go and open restaurants. You just mentioned the area of Rangoon, and I know the Rangoon sisters are prominent chefs that we're aware of in UK. Do you feel like the food scene that represents Burma has changed since you last spoke about what it looks like in the UK?
Not as much as I'd like it to. I think it's still very difficult. I mean, I think when I spoke in that podcast originally, there was like one restaurant of note.
Yeah.
We still only have that one restaurant down in London, except they have 2 branches now. And then up north, there were 2 kind of in Manchester area. Now there's only 1. So it's actually in some ways kind of gone backwards.
Yeah.
So, and then in terms of kind of supper clubs, there aren't very many. There's one that's been started by a friend of mine in Manchester called Rice Over Everything. And her stuff is great. But it seems that more what's happening now is that people are kind of trying to put out like the actual food rather than meals. So that friend of mine who did supper clubs, she also sells Burmese chili oils, which are fantastic. And then another friend of mine, she is based down here in London, and she's called Muya, and she started making kind of like relishes and sambols and also that pickled tea leaf. She started selling that. So I think here we're starting to kind of concentrate on trying to sell the ingredients first before we get down to the actual restaurants, which is which is good for me because I can
Yeah.
cook, but it's not necessarily good for people who just want to go and try it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need more. We need more.
What is that? Oh, sorry, I was gonna say, what is that restaurant? That one restaurant in London that?
Oh yeah, sorry. It's called La Pet, so it's named after the pickled tea leaves.
A minute. I have been there. Am I crazy?
Have you?
Yeah, I have. It's there's one in it's like Shoreditch, kind of near Liverpool
So
Street.
that's the
and they have
OG.
two
That's
branches.
the original one.
Yeah.
And then they
That's
opened one in Covent
crazy.
Garden like last year, I think.
Okay, yeah, they have this like fish dish, and it's like a fried whole fish.
Yes.
And it's crispy.
So you went without me?
No, this is
That's what I'm hearing right now.
Yeah, this was, and do you know what? In the back of my mind, when we were preparing for this, I was like, I'm pretty sure. But then I just didn't go back to double check. But no, I love Burmese food. I don't
Yay!
No, it's really good. It's really nice. I do like it, and I can see where Mimi's mentioned about like the similarities to Indian food, and then you've got things that are like similar to pho but not as light. I can remember having that similar experience, but it was very fresh. I do remember that. Yeah, it was lovely.
I was gonna say we have an episode about Jamaican cuisine, so we both have a Jamaican background, and we are trying to explore as well why Jamaican restaurants don't grow and exist so much. So it's quite interesting you saying that within your community you're starting from products and you're starting from ingredients and like introducing it to the UK audience from like just try this bit and now try this bit and now try this bit, and then look, if you liked all of those things that you bought, come and try it kind of thing. Because what I think what Jamaican food is doing is just operating on we have a very big takeaway business structure, but I think that's also a way of people just trying like just grab a patty. Just grab a little box food, grab a little this, and now it's like I think both the cuisines need to be like, actually, let's put our feet in the sand properly.
Yeah. I do like the idea of the ingredients kind of being introduced slowly. I think it's a nice way to spark interest, but then people tend to like to be a bit left of centre, so it's like, I mean, you're using that chili oil, but I've actually got this kind of Burmese chili oil which you've probably never tried before, and I think that's
exactly yeah. So it's just kind of swapping one thing from your menu, your daily kind of cuisine. So baby steps, we're getting there.
What are some of the misconceptions and misunderstandings that you often encounter around Burmese?
Everyone thinks we put coriander on everything. We don't put coriander on everything. It seems to have become the default herb, which drives me nuts, actually. As I mentioned already, like in different parts of the country, it might be spring onions, it might be, mint, so like it's doing a bit of disservice to the plurality, the kind of the different groups. And the other thing, again, connected to that, everyone seems to think we put coconut in everything. And we don't. We barely put coconut in anything at all.
Which is interesting because when you were on Lekka with Lucy Dearlove, you basically made her coconut noodles.
I did, because
with coriander.
I'll tell you why. No, that does not have coriander. But I'll tell you why I tell you why I made those. It's because that is probably the most easy dish to cook a someone who's not used to these kind of flavors.
Right.
It's like the entry level dish. I've never ever fed that to anyone and they've gone, oh, that's a bit controversial or like challenging. Whereas mohinga, the national dish that I mentioned, the fish soup, like 50% of the time people will go, oh, I'm not so sure about that, just because fish soup in itself is quite a hard sell sometimes. But
I love a fish soup.
Chicken and coconut, everyone seems to like that. It doesn't matter, so.
Yeah.
It's not particularly representative of Burmese food, but it's like an easy crowd pleaser. So.
In your second book, Mandalay, Recipes and Tales from a Burmese Kitchen, many of these recipes feature MSG.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Because that's how I was taught to cook. That's how my family cooks. That's how restaurants in Burma, in Myanmar, cook. Ever since it was introduced, and I should know when, but a very, very long time ago, because, my grandmother used it, her mother used it, apparently. It's just been part of the condiments arsenal, So you've got, like, your tray of condiments at the side of your cooker, and you've got your salt and your pepper and your chili powder and your paprika and your ground ginger, we like ground spices, so this is what I was saying about the similarity with Indian cuisine. So rather than the fresh turmeric root or anything. And then you'd have, like, a little thing of MSG, like the thing behind me. So I've got, like, my classic panda, which is the kind of the receptacle, panda-shaped receptacle that's full of monosodium glutamate. And it's not anything that's considered or has ever been considered controversial. I mean, the name in Burmese is a chomong, and a chomong literally means flavor powder or sweet powder, sweetening powder. It's just a thing that we use. And actually, I think it's got a very similar name, similar translation in Thai and in Vietnamese and in Malaysian. Like, it's just the same name. It's just sweet powder, flavor powder. There's nothing odd about it. No one's ever felt the need to give it a chemical name. It's just another thing we use.
Would you use MSG in place of salt, or do you still have salt in the kitchen for particular recipes?
Yeah, so I mean, although it is a salt, it does not replace salt. You cannot use it to replace salt. I mean, in terms of like the strength, I guess, I always say my rough formula is if you have 1 teaspoon of salt, you would have a 1/4 teaspoon of MSG.
Okay.
Because that's the balance you need. Because the thing about MSG is it's not salty in terms of flavour, it is savoury. It is the umami that we've been talking about. It definitely, I mean, you can't see this because obviously this is a podcast, but I've got my little thing, my little shaker of MSG, and I've got my little shaker of salt. And they look very similar, I know, but this is how they live side by side. 2 little shakers, one of one white powder and one of another white powder. So
they'll see it on YouTube because we'll put some
YouTube. Some clips up,
they will see it.
And what happens if you accidentally grab the wrong shaker and you end up with 1 teaspoon of MSG and only a 1/4 teaspoon of salt?
You're in trouble. But in the same way that you'd be in trouble if you added like too much chili or put in like loads of salt when you meant to put in some sugar. It's something that you can rectify by adding more water, adding more ingredients, or you might have to chuck it out and start again. But it just means you have to be more careful about which shaker you're reaching for.
Is MSG, or you just kind of defined it and you've given it like its title and it's monosodium glutamate, but it has a reputation that is not necessarily very positive. Where do you think that comes from? Like, we've discussed a little bit on the previous episode of the Chinese restaurant syndrome, but that to us seems to happen so long ago. Like, I did not know about that as a thing, as a name. I just knew we don't eat that. Like, growing up in a household that was like, we don't eat that, but not necessarily why. So are there other things that you think are contributing to this bad reputation that MSG has, and how do we combat those things to have more umami in our life?
Well, I mean, it's propaganda. It was invented in 19 whatever, and then when it was first rolled out, everyone thought it was a godsend. In the West, in the East, it was in like soups, it was in stock cubes, it was added to, even now it's added to everything. If you've eaten Monster Munch or Oxo cubes or Japanese Kewpie mayonnaise or, pretty much anything. Maggi, like I said, Maggi seasoning, Maggi cubes, Aromat, all of these items, they all have MSG as an ingredient. But the thing is, the whole Chinese restaurant thing, long time ago, that was, I think, the 60s? I can't remember exactly. But basically, a medical journal, there was a letter. No one even knows who wrote the letter because it was allegedly a Chinese man, but then a white man came out in the it's just bizarre. But it was basically there was a letter that said, "Oh, it made me feel like tingly, gave me headaches, whatever," and then lots and lots of other people joined in. But like the FDA says it's safe, the Food Standards Agency here says it's safe, the New Zealand's Food Service says it's safe. It's like New Zealand Food Agency. But basically, it is something that. It got people's imagination in the same way that, to be brutally honest, in the same way that everyone decided that the MMR vaccine caused autism.
Right.
It was 2 things that were not connected became connected in the mind of people that kind of got carried away.
Yeah, because I think there is a correlation between like eating salty food and feeling dehydrated.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there is a correlation there.
Yeah.
But it's not a causation of that MSG.
Exactly. Anything that's got MSG in it will have lots of other things in it.
Sugar, oil.
And because it is often used in junk food, in processed food, there's all sorts of like nasties in those things that could also make you feel unwell. But there's been double-blind tests ever since. They've never thrown up any kind of proper evidence that says it is causing those symptoms. Now, I'm sure for some people, in the same way that there are all sorts of migraine triggers. It is. In fact, it definitely is something they should avoid. You know, but in the same way that some people need to not eat sugar, some people need to not eat salt.
Yeah.
Everything in moderation.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the main problem is because it somehow only ever got named after its chemical formulation. So like monosodium glutamate, it sounds terrifying.
Sounds crazy.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but like another name for it is sodium glutamate. And another name for salt is sodium chloride.
Yeah.
So I don't go, oh, pass me the sodium chloride. Because that sounds worse than sodium glutamate to me.
Yeah.
So.
But then that's so interesting because I learned in doing this research, yes, we have things like Maggi, but I think there's an American-Australian brand called Accent, which is
literally just MSG with brand name.
But when they talk about it, they're like, oh, we're just going to add some accent. Like, we're just going to add some accent.
Yeah. So that successfully became, and it's funny because I've got friends in the States who were asking me about this because they realised I'd kind of like started talking about this kind of thing. And then I went, go and look at your mum's cupboard. Does she have this? Because she was saying that her mum cooks a lot. And then she went, oh yeah, she does. And I went, turn it around and look at the ingredients label. And then she was like, oh, my mum's been using MSG all my life and I had no idea. So.
I think even when you were talking about it's in like Doritos and just the simple thing, the snacks that you pull for every single day, you don't realise what is actually in there because most people don't read the ingredients on the back of those things.
So like, a couple of years back, I edited an edition of Pit magazine, which is this amazing food magazine by Helen Graves, Holly Catford and Robert Billington. I basically bullied my way into editing that because they put out the theme and I kind of like messaged them and said, I'd really like to be involved in this.
I went on the website, but I couldn't get the print now. So the print obviously was a little while ago.
It's sold out.
It's sold out.
I should, if you give me an address, I'll send you a copy. But basically, no, seriously, because it's like, I'm so proud of this thing because it was basically being very nerdy, getting all my nerdy friends together to like write things that explains quite how present this is already in your kitchen and in your food cupboard, and you do not realise
so then
necessarily.
For clarity, is MSG the same as flavour enhancer? If I'm reading the back label of something and it says flavour enhancer, that is just another word for MSG?
It is another euphemism, yeah.
Wow, okay. Do you think it was two separate things?
If any of these are listed in the ingredients label, they contain MSG. So you've got E621, flavour enhancer, monosodium glutamate, yeast powder, yeast extract, hydrolyzed vegetable protein, soy extract, hydrolyzed yeast, autolyzed yeast, protein isolate. Because all of those are different euphemisms for what is fundamentally monosodium glutamate.
Interesting.
Yeah, the yeast powder, I see that in like stock powders.
Yeah, but it's everywhere.
Yeah.
One of the podcasts that I listened to about flavour and taste was people who are so anti-MSG, but you ask them, like, oh, so do you like Marmite? And they're like, oh yeah, I love it. And they're like, oh, okay.
And then the other thing, I was saying I was collecting nerds to help write this for me. So one of the nerds I got is a professor, a guy called Professor Barry Smith at the University of London. And so he was talking about, like, he does a double-blind test studies, and he's kind of been researching this for a very long time. He works at the Institute of Smell and Taste, I think it's called. And basically one of the things that they found is that when MSG goes into your mouth, when it hits water, liquid, moisture, your saliva, it has literally no difference from the glutamate that you find in Parmesan, in tomatoes, in breast milk, you know? Yeah. So all that it is a stabilized form of glutamate that happens to be dry in a packet or in a tin, you know?
Given that kind of like the historical context of MSG and understanding how present it is in a lot of the foods that we're currently eating, I'd probably say over the last, I don't know, ballpark, maybe like 10 years, we've really seen a shift in brands promoting or using no MSG as a bit of a USP. And from your perspective, do you feel like as long as we have that there, that stigma is always going to be around? Because a lot of people buy things and they think, oh, I've done it, if I'm being honest myself. I'm like, I'm going to get this stock cube because it says no MSG as opposed to that one. And I think for me, from my personal experience, as long as I see those things, it feeds into this notion that MSG is bad and to be avoided.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
This is what I was saying about propaganda, you know, because this has been the sign that appears on menus, and it's been the sign that appears on like product packaging, on labels. It obviously makes you think, oh, it's a good thing to have no MSG. And you don't necessarily have to have any knowledge beyond that. You trust people. Of course you trust people, you know. If it's on a label that says no colourings, no preservatives, no MSG. You're going to like put it all in the same category, right?
Yeah.
So, but as you say, I think in the past decade or so there has been a shift. You're seeing that much less, which is actually really nice. And the other thing is that, so at some point, like I think Walker's Crisps removed the MSG from all their crisps.
Right, yeah.
Probably due to pressure. And in the last few years, it's come back.
They put it back.
So if people are saying, Pringles taste better again, and Monster Munch tastes better again, and What's-Its tastes better again, it's because the MSG is back. That's why it tastes the way it tasted in your childhood, because it went missing for a bit, and everything tasted really bland and crap. So.
When you had mentioned about like moderation, when I think about the sugar tax and like the impact that has had on so many of the products that we love. I love Ribena. Yeah. It just does not taste the same with whatever it is that they're putting in there. And I guess with that removal of MSG, without it, you can taste the difference. And if you're having things in moderation.
Yeah. I wonder though, because something that I do, I said to you in the email that I sent you, I grew up in an anti-MSG household, and at some point it's like a low salt household, low to no salt household. And just seeing how my parents shopped around things, like we would buy the stock cubes that were without salt. And I think now that I obviously am cooking for myself, I still do prefer to do that, but that's as a control measure, so that I can add the salt I want, or etc.
But that's an argument in favour of MSG.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
so I think it's a nice way to reframe it in terms of you're not buying the MSG like with the
wrapped in something.
Wrapped in something. If you're not used to it, then go buy the MSG by itself and continue to buy your products that don't contain MSG, but open your mind to including it in your food the same way that I have now learned to salt food the way I like it to be salted. And the same argument stands for, so I bake, as I'm sure you've seen, but if you buy self-raising flour, it's easier, it's cheaper, it's quicker, but to control your bake, plain flour and mix in the raising agents that you want. So if you're getting used to cooking with MSG or just trying it, and you're scared to go and just buy things that contain it just fully in it, carry on buying the products that say that they don't contain it, and start adding it in a pinch at a time, quarter tablespoon at a time, according with your salt balance, and just see how you go from there. Because I definitely think it's an unlearning that you have to do, but it's also like a palate thing. So once I started eating out of my house more, everything was salty.
Yeah.
Like everything was salty. And it put me off, and I was like, oh gosh, I'm going back to my dad's cooking. Yeah. But then once
I have to say, I do use a lot less salt than a lot of people, because although I said that you can't swap and do a straight shop of MSG to salt, if you use MSG, you do end up finding that you need a lot less salt, because I think sometimes the salt is almost overcompensating.
Yeah.
Like, I need a flavour, I need a note there if you add more salt. So yeah, as you say, you experiment, you understand how they interplay with each other, and you find out what works for you and what works for the other people that you're feeding.
Yeah. I think you can. Oh, sorry. I think when you do it the way that you're suggesting as well, you can build a better appreciation for it, because you can see as you're cooking the difference that it is making right there and then. Whereas when you buy these things with MSG in it already, you're tasting the finished product. You don't really understand
the impact that it's the other issue when you buy things that are in, like if it's part of Marmite, if it's part of like Maggi seasoning, if it's part of Knorr stock cubes, is that 9 times out of 10 they will have another very distinct flavour that is like that you might not necessarily want. So like Knorr is a very popular brand that in Asia, so they have chicken powder and mushroom powder, but what if you don't want chicken flavouring? What if you don't like mushroom flavouring? And the other thing that I find quite interesting, and I'm not sure I've delved very much into this, and it might not be wise for you to either, is that it would be so useful for vegans, because you're getting that savouriness that a lot of them can't necessarily replicate if you're not putting meat in. And I know I'm not talking about vegans who have been vegan all their life and know what they're doing. I'm talking about people who may have switched from being meat eaters and want to understand if they want to replicate certain notes, certain flavours. MSG is actually quite a good way of experimenting and trying to get back the flavours that you might be missing, or you might want to recreate. But this is something that people need to think about.
Would nutritional yeast be something like close to umami kind of MSG type flavour? Because I know a lot of vegans use nutritional
As
yeast
cheese.
as a cheese.
Yes.
replacement.
Well, no, exactly. It is
Yeah.
basically an equivalent, but cheesy.
Cheese.
So, we're going back to it's the same thing, but you're getting a note of something
Yeah,
else
yeah.
you might not want.
Not one. Yeah, 100%. That's my issue with nutritional yeast. Cause
Yeah, you can't. Once you put it in, it's cheesy.
It's cheese.
Yeah.
Kind of what I've just said about like your tolerance to things and how they build up. It could be salt, it could be sugar, it could be MSG. Do you think that you get desensitized to MSG? If you've got an MSG forward palate, do you find that you want to keep adding more and more of it the way that someone with a sweet tooth would want to just keep pushing it, like adding syrups and ice creams, etc.?
So not me personally, it's not happened to me personally, but I can imagine that would happen. And if you think about people who, for example, really love things like Doritos and Pringles and nachos, and you know what I mean, I can imagine that they don't quite get the hit that they need unless they're having something very savoury. There was a crisp, like a rice cracker, I suppose, in Japan, which I really like, which you can get in Japan Center here, which is kind of, it's like basically a vaguely sugary, salty, MSG flavoured cracker. And they put out a limited edition version, which I think they called like 1,000%. Basically, it is the same coating, but like 3 times thicker. And I can't eat it. I think it's too savoury. Like, if I tried to eat one and my face just like shriveled up. So yeah, there is definitely such a thing as too much, but obviously there is a market because those babies sold out. So there were people that were buying those crisps and couldn't get enough of it. So yeah, I'm sure for some people you could become so desensitized to it and you need a bigger hit, right? But
yeah, I guess that with anything.
Not me, not yet.
If you love something enough, I don't know, because I go through phases and I like something, I will binge on it.
Yeah.
Like I will just consume, and it's just never enough. But I guess, yeah.
I wonder now if any of my hyperfixations on food at certain points, just for unawareness, have been that MSG savouriness.
Yeah.
Like, I used to eat chili crisp oil like it was going out of fashion.
Yeah, that's got MSG in it.
Yeah,
It's a good brand.
Ramen, gyoza.
Is it the Kikumli one?
Yeah. But what's interesting, and I found this, like, there was a point in my life when I was vegan. I've been everything under the sun. But I think you see that when you're vegan, for example, your food choices change because of the accompaniments. So, like, you don't eat as much, like, McDonald's, even though you can eat the chips and you can eat the stuff, but because you're used to eating the beef burger, you just don't eat McDonald's at all. So I wonder if there's stuff that, like, if you're a MSG person, or if you're starting to get used to it, or you try and step away from it, if you're just avoiding like whole food groups out there because you just decided not to eat it. Like people completely don't eat Chinese because of their association with it. Like and they're missing out on such a massive like food group and so much food that they can enjoy just by ruling out this tiny little thing. Is it better or is it any healthier to cook with more MSG and less salt?
I think so because I think so. I did read a study where they said you can reduce salt enough that it is a boon. For people who have high blood pressure levels, if they swap a certain amount of MSG for the amount of salt, there have been studies that said actually it's brought their blood pressure down. So yeah, I think for a lot of people it could be a real benefit. You'll need less salt. I mean that's the end of it. The summary.
That's something that you need to look into.
I think I need that.
Malaka's main food groups are olive oil and sea salt.
Yeah, I love salt, like smoked salt, flake salt. I like my food to be well salted. I've never cooked with MSG before, but it's definitely something I've gone through, like a similar journey to Harley's, where I was in a household where you don't consume MSG. It was just stigmatized. It just wasn't a good thing. And then as I grew older, I was like, well, I'm not going to cook with it, or I'm actively going to avoid it. And then over the last few years, you open yourself up to information and you're just like, I think I'm missing out. I don't think I really actually ever took the time to do the research myself. And when you go out and you do the research yourself, you understand that a lot of what we're being told, like you said, you trust people. And most people got that information from someone else, not from a valid source. So I mean,
it's interesting though because like pure MSG is really quite hard to buy in this country even now. You have to go to so I have two main sources. You can either go to an Asian shop, so like Chinese food, Southeast Asian food, or you can go to a Turkish shop because they sell it in Turkish shops. But in Turkish shops, it's labelled Chinese salt.
Okay, interesting.
I I've seen that.
Really?
Yeah, because where I like to buy bulgur wheat.
Yeah.
Like the one that you get in a Turkish restaurant. But when you buy bulgur wheat at Tesco, what you get is cracked bulgur wheat.
Yeah.
So I either go to the Polish stores or just generally the European stores, and that's where I'll get a whole bulgur wheat like this, like they actually serve you in Turkish restaurants. And 100%, I just browse, I just look.
Yeah.
I have seen that labelled as Chinese salt.
Yeah. If somebody is not quite ready to cook with actual MSG but wants to understand how they can add more umami into their food, I know you'd mentioned a couple of there's different ways of achieving it. What other kind of products are your first port of call if you want to just experience more umami? I know soy sauce is like a really big one, but there's like a few others. Yeah, mushrooms.
I mean, if you want the kind of layered flavour that MSG gives you, probably the closest thing that's readily available in this country is miso, because it has that savouriness and saltiness, that combination that you don't necessarily get from those other things. Now, obviously, that has its own issues. It's quite expensive for a start, but you know, you can probably. I think in my recipes in my books, I've probably said like substitute maybe half a teaspoon of miso for the MSG that I've suggested. But you know, there are also kind of commercially available products, so like not pure ingredients, but things like Maggi cubes, Maggi seasoning. You can buy something called Aromat, which is a Swiss formulation. Which has MSG as the primary product, and like things like celery seeds and things like that. And you can get that anywhere. And any bog standard supermarket will have Aromat on the shelf.
A lot of our Nigerian listeners will use Aromat in their cooking. Personally, they use Aromat in their stew or like in their jollof rice to just give it that oomph. And I think it's kind of seen as an alternative to Maggi, or some people use both as well. So
well, they both got the same core ingredient. That's why they're good.
Yeah.
So I think, unless is there anything else you want to add about MSG? Anything you want to read out of? I can see you're flicking through the.
I'm just trying to remind myself. I think the main thing is that it is bizarre that it's because the whole Chinese restaurant seasoning thing, but it is so heavily associated with food that is Asian/Chinese. But it is available in so many different forms all over the country, and not just like the global South, as might be put. The West. The North, they've been using it for ages. So one of the places I like to go on holidays, well, I'm not recently so much because it's got incredibly expensive, but Iceland. Iceland is possibly one of the whitest countries you could ever go to, right? But it's fun and it's beautiful, and there's all sorts of like crazy things to look at. But on like a lot of the tables in all of the restaurants, they have something called potato seasoning.
Yeah.
And so it's MSG, salt and pepper, and it's basically just like a little bottle. And again, it's just MSG mixed with a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And it's just there as their daily seasoning. So, and the reason I picked up my copy of it is because we had like a photo shoot. We took pictures of everything that had MSG that people didn't necessarily know about. So you mentioned Polish food, so kucharek.
Yeah, the vegetable seasoning.
Basically, MSG seasoning. Yeah, we've got the Maggi cubes that we've seen earlier. Vetsin is basically a fancy, just a very, my mirror image is terrible. It's a very fancy tin for what is basically just MSG. Aromat, which we mentioned just now, that again is pretty much just MSG. I don't know why I'm showing you the magazine. I have all these things in my cupboard. Chippy salt, which is like the #1 Australian table seasoning. Again, it's MSG.
We need to do. Yeah, we owe Australia an episode all about their food and cuisine. It's just so far away, we just don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And this one, admittedly, I've never tried it. It's called green seasoning, and apparently it's Caribbean, and apparently it's one of the main components of that as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the green seasoning. I think I've actually got a bottle of that.
I was going to say, that's something that we're very familiar with.
Yeah, but then when I did read that, do you know what? I think it shows up on the green seasoning as the E161 something. Yeah, I did see that. And I'm like, what is this? But now
I'm going to read every single packet in my kitchen.
Yeah, do it. It's a good experiment. You probably won't be able to see this, but literally, this is just a list of things that you might have in your cupboard, which is basically full of MSG.
Gosh. You don't know what you don't know,
But it's so funny because I guarantee those things have been in my cupboard also my whole life. Yeah. And when my parents were preaching no MSG,
just never knew.
I was definitely going to school with some Monster Munch. Yeah. So, like...
Yeah, exactly!
Yeah, you just don't know what you don't know, and I guess
Those prawn cocktail Walker's crisps were hitting.
Exactly.
Yeah, I used to love them.
Quavers, Pringles. Seriously, if it's a good crisp, 9 times out of 10, it will have MSG as one of the ingredients.
Very interesting. Okay, well, our last question.
It's
Oh, go on.
sorry, I was just gonna say, it's like one of my favourite popcorn seasonings as well. So like, I'll just make some fresh popcorn and then scatter salt, pepper, and MSG on top of it with a bit of paprika, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like the most Moorish popcorn that you can eat while watching a movie. So.
Is that something that you've come up with, or is that commonplace in like Burmese and Southeast Asian cinemas?
No. In Burmese cinemas we have sunflower seeds, like roasted, which also tend to have salt and MSG on them. To be
But
fair,
that savoury part.
but it's like a very common seasoning on whatever you've got going, basically.
Yeah.
So.
Because the MSG kind of sings to the savoury part of food. Would
Yeah.
you use it on something more fruity? Would you get the best out of it if you're gonna put some MSG on your fruits or something? How would that work?
I don't think it would work at all.
Okay.
Because the whole point is it doesn't really have a flavour of its own so much.
Yeah.
The reason it's called flavour enhancer is because it enhances existing savoury flavour, so the existing umami. So if there isn't anything there to start with, I think it just kind of conflicts slightly.
Right. Okay.
I know some people who have used it in like martinis and stuff, so in place of salt, so you'll have a dirty martini with MSG in it instead, or like in a margarita or whatever. And that has worked, but again, that's somewhere where salt is already expected to be part of it.
Okay.
Um,
No, that
I
makes
don't think it's something that you could like introduce cold, basically.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
That makes sense, and it helps me to understand the key difference between MSG and salt, the relationship between the two, and kind of how you introduce both of them. 'Cause
Yeah.
you can pretty much add salt to
Like I put salt on cookies.
almost
like,
anything to bring up
Yeah.
what is there, but MSG is umami specifically, so that has to be
Yeah.
present for it to be at its best.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, my final question is about introducing Burmese food and food with MSG to people who've never experienced it before. So I flicked through Mandalay and picked a recipe that I think, if you're trying to get into food, I think this is just most similar to something that we talk about all the time and that we're very big fans of, which is Jamaican curry goat. So you've got a recipe in the book for goat and split pea curry, and this recipe features MSG. So that would be my pick of recommendation. It doesn't have to be necessarily something from the book, but what would you recommend to someone to get into something that is Burmese and allows them to play with MSG?
You know what? I've said this to various other people, but basically just make an omelette. Just make a very basic omelette, whip it up with some salt and some pepper, put in maybe a little bit of spring onion, some tomatoes and some chilies, and then a tiny pinch of MSG. And you can do it with a control. You can do one without the MSG and one with. Make yourself 2 omelettes and see if you can tell what the difference is. And I think you will be able to. 'Cause, I mean, basically, I think that's the way it works the most easiest is with eggs.
Okay.
It will just kick up any egg dish you have.
You're singing
So-
to me. Yeah, you're singing. I love eggs. I love eggs. I could eat eggs every single day. So I fear that if I had the MSG in my eggs, there was no going back for me. But I'm definitely spring onions and then some like crispy
Tomatoes.
onions and tomatoes. Oh,
A little bit of
gosh.
fresh green chili,
Yeah.
and then just a little sprinkle of MSG into the mix. So not afterwards, during
Okay.
in the kind of like the egg batter, I suppose. Batter's not really batter, it's just eggs.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm definitely gonna try it. I guess that's why I even like that the chili oil
yeah.
on
Yeah.
top of my egg. It just
That's literally.
it just sends it up completely. So
Oh, can I be annoying and recommend one other thing?
yeah, okay.
My BFC, Burmese fried chicken.
Is it in the
That-
book?
It's got to dry rub. It is. It is Nigella Lawson's favourite recipe, she says,
Oh.
boasting. But basically, there's a fried chicken recipe in there, and it has MSG in the dry rub, and like it's not Burmese fried chicken if you don't have MSG in it.
Okay.
So
I think that's the one you might have to cook
looking
and show us
for
and
it.
take lovely pictures.
Right, we're looking at it, everyone. We're looking at it.
What's in there? What's in there?
Chicken thighs, which I also know you're a fan of. Where this is a chicken thigh.
Yeah.
This is a chicken thigh right here. Or drumsticks or wings. Yeah, fine. Lime, groundnut oil, chili sauce, and for the dry rub, which is obviously what you're talking about, some self-raising flour, ground turmeric, garlic powder, ground ginger, salt, white pepper, and MSG.
yeah,
Nice.
and so like I said, Nigella Lawson has put my recipe on her website. So like, if if you want to, MSG is on Nigella
Yeah.
Lawson's website, so if she can cook with it, anyone can. Come on.
That is very valid.
Yeah.
That is so true.
Harley's gonna make that for us to taste.
Is Harley?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Harley's gonna make that for us to taste, and then we're gonna let everybody know. But I imagine it looks lovely in the book.
And to be honest, it only has 2 tablespoons of flour in it.
Yeah.
Little Miss Gluten Avoidant over here.
Yeah. I have a gluten intolerance.
Oh gosh, don't
yeah.
kill yourself over it.
See,
Oh my
Marky,
God.
It's an intolerance, it's not an allergy.
Yeah, but
so
we-
I
okay.
had to say I'm gluten avoidant.
we should play it safe though. I should make this for me, not you.
Anyway. Well, we're gonna try the chicken and let everybody know, but it looks lovely.
Please,
can't
I
wait
would
to taste
love
it.
if you try my chicken, you say you like it, that would make my day.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Harley, you got a task.
Oh god. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Mimi
you.
A of Mandalay and Noodle. Noodle. Mimi, where can we find you on the internet? What do you want people to know, or do follow or subscribe? Or...
Do you know what? Instagram is probably the easiest place to find me now that Twitter seems to be getting like
Oh,
horrible
yeah.
death.
Oh.
But yeah, I'm Meemalee, Meemalee. Pretty much any app that will have me, I'll be on there.
Okay, great.
Even if I'm just there as a ghostly presence.
Definitely link here anyway.
We'll have that linked in the show notes, and also a link to Buy Mandalay, which is the recipe book of recipes and tales from a Burmese kitchen. If you have never tried or made anything before, you only need to get an egg. We have an episode about the egg crisis, but I've had luck getting eggs recently. I've had some luck getting
they're
eggs.
coming back.
Yeah, the eggs are out there, so
They're
all you've got to
coming
do now is track down to MSG, and you'll have your first wonderful experience of
Or
it.
if you're in London, try Le Pet. Do you like Le Pet, Mimi?
Yeah. No,
Okay, Mimi
it's a really nice
approved.
restaurant.
It's a nice restaurant.
Okay, and maybe don't
Run
try the
by
little
some
guy.
really lovely people, so
Yeah,
go support them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the fish soup might not be where you want to start, but
The crispy fish.
the crispy fish.
I've actually got some pictures from when I went to Le Pet, so I'll
Okay.
share them
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
Instagram. Yeah. And I'll book us a table, Harley, don't worry.
Thank you.
Do it.
I'll do the fried chicken and you take us to the pet.
Yes.
Deal. You heard it here first. Thank you so much for joining us, Mimi.
Thank you, Mimi.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you,
been
everyone,
really
for
nice.
listening.
Thanks for liking. Thanks, Carly.
Thank you so much, Mimi. That was just like the exact conversation that we needed. We've learned so much.
Yeah, my
And
mind is open.
yes.
I actually want the MSG on eggs. I need it. I
You
need
know?
it. I actually gassed it. And I need it. I need to taste it. Yeah.
Well, the next episode.
Golden egg with MSG. You're joking. Anyway, go on.
The next episode of our mini-series will be next week. And to give you a little taste, see what I did there?
Yeah.
Of what it's going to be about, we're going to be talking to somebody who has a very different experience of eating than we do, and potentially most of our listeners, because she can't smell. And this is something that's come up a lot since COVID, because a lot of people lost their sense of smell over COVID. And
I was one of those people.
You were one of those people.
I was
and
in
your sense of
deep
taste.
distress because if you listen to the first episode, you know that taste and flavour, a lot of that is linked
to your sense of
the
smell. So if you're interested in that conversation, please do come back next Monday, or wherever your designated podcast listening day is.
Yeah.
That episode will be out next week. So thank you guys so much for listening, and we will catch you next episode.
Bye guys.